The photograph that would unravel everything was captured at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in Venice. Lauren Sanchez, however, would not discover its existence until 3 months later, when it arrived in a plain manila envelope, unmarked, accompanied by a single handwritten note. "You were never meant to see this." What she saw in that image would shatter not only her understanding of her marriage, but also the world she believed she had entered. The photo depicted her wedding reception from an angle she had never witnessed before high above, through what appeared to be a hidden camera mounted inside the crystal chandelier. Yet, it was not the angle that froze her blood. It was the scene unfolding in the background. Her new husband stood in a corner she could not see from the head table, deep in conversation with a man she did not recognize. Both stared directly at her as she smiled and waved at guests, completely unaware she was being watched. The man's face was partially hidden, but his posture spoke volumes. A tablet rested in his hands, displaying what seemed to be financial documents even through the grainy image. Her husband's expression was not one of joy or celebration. It was the cold, calculating look of a man conducting business, while his bride unknowingly performed for an audience oblivious to the transaction disguised as a celebration. Yet this revelation was still 3 months away. That magical night in Venice, Lauren believed she was living a fairy tale. The truth, however, was far darker, and it had begun long before she ever uttered "I do." 6 months prior, high in Manhattan's glass towers, where power brokers controlled the world from climate-controlled boardrooms, a very different kind of ceremony was underway. There were no flowers, no music, no champagne toasts. Instead, leather portfolios, digital tablets, and cold, clinical conversations dominated the room. The attendees were no wedding planners or coordinators. They were forensic accountants, private investigators, media strategists, and attorneys experts in what they tactfully called reputation management. The conference room overlooked Central Park, but no one noticed. Their focus was on a single manila folder at the center of the mahogany table, labeled simply Project Venice. Inside lay a 247-page document that would make any ordinary person's blood run cold. This was not a wedding plan. It was a blueprint for the most sophisticated character assassination ever conceived. Every detail of what the world would perceive as a romantic celebration had been reverse-engineered to serve a darker purpose. The guest list was not drawn from friendship or family ties. Each name was a strategic asset, a potential witness. The venue was chosen not for its beauty, but for its surveillance capabilities. Even the menu was carefully designed with ulterior motives. Certain dishes were carefully chosen to keep guests alert and talkative, ensuring their conversations could be captured by the hidden microphones strategically placed throughout the palazzo. At the head of the table sat the man orchestrating this intricate deception, his expression as unreadable as a chess grandmaster planning the next move. To the world, he appeared to be preparing for the marriage of his life. In truth, he was engineering the most elaborate trap in modern relationship history, not to catch a criminal, but to manufacture one. Phase 1 is documentation, he said to his assembled team, his voice carrying the cold precision of someone reviewing quarterly financials rather than preparing for nuptials. Every gesture, every word, every interaction had to be observed and recorded. She needed to believe she was stepping into her new life. While in reality constructing her own prosecution file, the attorneys nodded, tapping notes into tablets that would never see the inside of a courtroom. Private investigators adjusted their earpieces, plotting the installation of surveillance equipment invisible to everyone but the technical specialists. Media strategists began drafting press releases designed to portray romance, all while generating an airtight paper trail. Phase 2 begins immediately after the ceremony, he continued, displaying architectural plans of the Venetian palazzo on a wall-mounted screen. She will think the 30-day observation period is just a honeymoon. In reality, we will conduct the most comprehensive civilian background investigation ever performed. An attorney raised a hand. The prenuptial agreement? A thin, calculated smile crossed his face. That document doesn't protect my assets, it sets the legal framework for her destruction. Every clause is written not to shield me from her, But to ensure she has no recourse when our plan unfolds, the room fell silent as the weight of the statement sank in. They were not planning a wedding, they were executing a siege, and the target had no idea she was already under attack. Lauren's first hint that something was off came during what should have been the most magical period of her life. The weeks following her engagement were a whirlwind. Magazine covers, designer fittings, exclusive parties where she rubbed elbows with celebrities and politicians she had only seen on television. She felt like Cinderella, catapulted overnight from her ordinary life into one of private jets and endless possibilities. But Cinderella's story never included the subtle, unsettling details that began piling up in Lauren's new world. The personal shopper who insisted on accompanying her to every appointment under the guise of security. The social media manager who suddenly appeared, claiming that someone of her stature needed professional oversight online. The nutritionist, fitness trainer, and image consultant, all gifted by her fiancés, insisting their services were essential. What Lauren didn't realize was that each gift came with invisible strings. The personal shopper reported on every purchase, every preference, every casual remark about wealth or lifestyle. The social media manager had full access to all her accounts, monitoring not only what she posted, but who she followed, who followed her, and even the metadata embedded in every photo she shared. The nutritionist didn't just track her diet. He observed her emotional reactions in various situations, constructing a detailed psychological profile that could later be used against her. Perhaps the most insidious member of her team was the fitness trainer. During their sessions, he would coax her into discussing past relationships, family dynamics, her dreams, and her fears. Lauren believed she was bonding with someone who understood the pressures of her sudden new life. In reality, every confession she made was being meticulously documented, providing ammunition for a character assassination carefully orchestrated long before she knew it. "Tell me about your ex-boyfriend," he would ask as she pushed through a grueling exercise. It must be difficult to trust again after being hurt. Exhausted and vulnerable, Lauren would share her past disappointments, insecurities, and doubts about whether she deserved her incredible fortune. Every word was captured by a hidden device in the trainer's water bottle and analyzed by behavioral specialists, building a complete map of her psychological weaknesses. The engagement party at a private Hamptons estate, meant to celebrate love, was instead a live test for the surveillance system that would later monitor the wedding. Guests mingled on manicured lawns, unaware that dozens of hidden cameras recorded their conversations from multiple angles. Lauren glided through the crowd like a princess, accepting congratulations and basking in attention, completely oblivious that every interaction was being logged and scrutinized. Even the guest list had been crafted with surgical precision. Old friends from Lauren's past weren't invited out of nostalgia. They were strategically placed to make her feel comfortable enough to speak openly about matters she might otherwise guard. Business associates were included to observe her in professional settings. Media personalities were stationed to provoke memorable remarks, which could later be twisted out of context. "She seems different," one of Lauren's college friends remarked, unaware their conversation was captured by a microphone cleverly hidden in a flower arrangement. That observation would later appear in a confidential report labeled "Subject Behavioral Patterns." During social integration phase, analysts noted Lauren's growing self-consciousness as she adapted to her new world, but interpreted this natural response as evidence of deceptive behavior. Every ordinary human reaction was reframed as suspicious, strengthening the case against her day by day. The prenuptial agreement was presented just 3 days before the wedding, when Lauren was deep in final preparations and emotionally drained. The timing was deliberate. Attorneys had calculated that she would be too preoccupied to scrutinize the dense legal document or negotiate meaningful changes. What she didn't know was that this agreement was far from conventional. Hidden within its 87 pages of dense legal jargon were clauses granting her husband unprecedented control over her life during and after the marriage. Silence clauses would bar her from speaking publicly about the relationship. Image clauses would let him dictate how she appeared in the media. Financial clauses threatened to leave her destitute if she crossed him. Most insidiously, vague behavioral clauses defined acceptable conduct so ambiguously that nearly any action could be deemed a violation. Speaking to certain people, visiting particular places, expressing personal opinions, all of these could trigger penalties under the contract, which carried not only severe financial consequences but also complete social isolation, enforced through a network of powerful allies. Lauren signed the document in her bridal suite, surrounded by flowers and champagne, believing she was taking the final step toward her dream wedding. In truth, she was signing a meticulously crafted trap. Designed by legal experts to make the impossible seem inevitable, Venice had not been chosen for its romance, but for its unmatched surveillance potential. The historic palazzo that would host the ceremony had been secretly acquired 6 months prior through a shell company, granting the technical team unrestricted access to install an unprecedented monitoring system. Every room was outfitted with multiple hidden cameras disguised as light fixtures, artwork, and decorative pieces that no guest would suspect. The audio system was even more advanced, featuring directional microphones capable of isolating conversations in a crowded room. The palazzo's centuries-old architecture with thick walls, multiple levels, and hidden alcoves offered perfect cover for the miles of fiber optic cables, connecting every device to a central monitoring station discreetly housed in the renovated wine cellar. The guest list of 300 represented more than just attendees. They were unwitting participants in a high-stakes psychological experiment. Hollywood celebrities added glamour and distraction, ensuring media coverage focused on fashion and star power rather than the subtle signs of surveillance. Politicians and business leaders acted as character witnesses, lending credibility to the narrative carefully orchestrated behind the scenes. Family and close friends were strategically placed to provoke emotional reactions from Lauren, all of which would be meticulously recorded and analyzed. The ceremony itself was choreographed with military-like precision. Lauren's position at the altar had been calculated to maximize her visibility to the hidden devices. The officiant, selected for reputation and gravitas, was also chosen for his vocal frequencies, which would not interfere with the audio equipment's ability to isolate conversations. Even the music was picked not for sentiment but for its acoustic qualities, designed to mask the subtle hum of hidden recording devices. As Lauren walked down the aisle in her custom-designed gown, believing she was living every bride's dream, she was unknowingly taking part in the most documented ceremony in history. Every step, every smile, every tear was captured from dozens of angles and stored on servers that would preserve these moments not as a celebration of love, but as evidence in a premeditated case. The reception revealed the true intent of the evening, though only to those who knew where to look. Tables were arranged so that Lauren's closest friends and family were seated in positions fitted with the most sensitive recording equipment, capturing every intimate word and gesture. Every conversation she had about her past, her personality, her relationships was captured in meticulous detail. Business associates were strategically positioned to monitor her discussions about professional skills and ambitions, all to later undermine her credibility. The dancing, the toasts, the cake cutting, every traditional wedding ritual played out against a backdrop of industrial-level surveillance that would rival intelligence operations. Lauren moved through the evening radiating happiness, accepting congratulations and posing for photographs, oblivious that each moment was being meticulously documented as evidence for her eventual undoing. The photograph that would expose the truth showing her husband in a secretive business meeting during the reception was taken by one of the dozens of cameras she had no idea existed. Yet it was also the one piece of evidence that was not meant to survive. Someone, perhaps a technician with a conscience or a vigilant security guard, had preserved that single image and discreetly removed it from the palazzo. That photograph would eventually confirm that her entire marriage had been built on deception, but it arrived far too late to prevent the trap from closing around her life. The assault came exactly as planned, precise and unrelenting. By the time Lauren realized she was under attack, the machinery of her destruction was already operating across multiple states and even countries. The first wave was legal. Lawsuits appeared simultaneously in New York, California, and London. Each claimed different forms of alleged misconduct, but all were designed to freeze her assets and push her toward bankruptcy while she defended herself. The prenuptial agreement she had signed included clauses making her liable for legal fees on both sides. Ensuring that each day of litigation would deepen her financial entrapment, the second wave was social. Within hours of the lawsuits being filed, her husband's media team began leaking carefully crafted narratives to tabloids and gossip outlets. Surveillance footage from their marriage was edited and presented out of context to make her appear manipulative and calculating. Private conversations with friends were released to portray her as ungrateful or scheming, and even her charitable work was twisted to suggest self-promotion and social climbing. The third wave was professional. Every business contact she had established during her marriage suddenly became unavailable. Projects she had been developing were abruptly canceled. Agents who had once eagerly represented her stopped returning calls. Her social media accounts, which her husband's team had been managing, were flooded with negative comments from accounts masquerading as organic users, but actually controlled by sophisticated bot networks, designed to destroy her online reputation. Within 48 hours, Lauren was completely isolated. Friends who had once celebrated her marriage distanced themselves, either believing the false stories or fearing association. Family members received anonymous packages with alleged evidence of her misconduct, poisoning even her closest relationships. The most devastating blow came when she discovered her own calls to attorneys were being monitored, with every strategy she attempted anticipated and countered before it could be executed. Every potential ally was warned away, leaving her to fight a war blind to the strategies of enemies who could see every move she made. The ultimate revelation came when she realized even her discovery of the surveillance had been orchestrated. The anonymous envelopes, the photographs, the exposure of her husband's deception, it had all been part of the plan. She had been allowed to know she was being manipulated because the psychological impact was part of her punishment. The note accompanying the final envelope made it unmistakably clear: you were never meant to win. You were meant to serve as an example. Lauren understood that her entire marriage had been a performance designed not only to destroy her, but to send a warning to anyone who might threaten the established order of power. She had been selected, manipulated, and destroyed as a demonstration of what happens to those who defy the system. Sitting alone in her empty penthouse, her assets frozen, her reputation shattered, she realized she had never been fighting for love or her future. She had been cast as the villain in a story where absolute power meant never facing consequences. The photograph that had sparked her journey toward the truth now seemed almost trivial in the context of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond her personal downfall. She had been sacrificed to preserve a system, and the 2 words her husband whispered in Venice were not a confession of regret, but a declaration that her fate had been sealed long before she believed she was falling in love. In the silent emptiness of her penthouse, Lauren understood the brutal truth. She had never been a bride. She had been evidence, and the jury had delivered its verdict before the trial had even begun.